against my MO, and I'll agree with you. I actually agree with you. It makes sense. And I'd say this much. When it comes to minorities, the least successful and the most racist are black ones in the United States. Now, do you think that correlates, or do you think that's just like coincidence?
I think it probably correlates, but it's hard to say if it's coincidence because a lot of the issues are probably like caused the exact, like they come from similar places. Like I think black people are probably uniquely kind of hateful against some minorities, but black people are also like really uniquely, and I think you agree with this because this is kind of the argument you're making a tree. Black people were like uniquely fucked over probably by the United States, right? Like even the whole like dichotomy of like just black people and just white people, like these categories were kind of sort of invented in America just to justify chattel slavery. Not to say that racism didn't exist in other parts of the world, it did, but like to the extent that we did slavery in the United States, it seems like the US was kind of like a world leader on that.
I agree. You're 100% right, but how long do you think that could last? That line of reasoning to justify
yeah,
their
that's the
actions or their views
issue.
on
So
things?
like this is a really hard question for people and it's a funny one to ask people. So you'd be like, can white people say the N-word? Can white people say the N-word? And people are like, no. And it's like, okay, why not? Because of historical reasons, systematic racism, blah, blah, blah. Then you ask this question. If black people ever got to an area where they were like caught up with white people, would it be okay to say the N-word then? And then what does it mean? How do you know if black people are caught up? Because that's a really hard one for a lot of people to answer, I think. And like the question of like, when is racism over? And when is it just like people having problems? Because like, it's probably not the case that all racism in the country is, like the country's racist until black people are completely caught up, right? Like that's probably not the case. So it's, yeah, that's it's hard to figure the answer out. So,
I mean, when it comes to black people always having a excuse as to why they're in the position, the economic position they're in, they say it's systemic racism. Now that's one I want to ask you about, because systemic racism does not say that, you know, America was racist in the fucking past. No, it says America is still racist. Its system is still designed to keep black people down.
no, that's
Do you
bullshit.
think that's true?
That's fucking bullshit.
You don't think systemic racism is a real thing?
Depends on what systemic racism is, because people have like sometimes people have really stupid definitions of it, and they'll say, yeah, systemic racism means that we have systems that perpetuate real racism from the past. So we have fake racism today, but the fake racism is like very real and it's perpetuating the real racism from the past, right? Like technically there aren't like racist policies today that make black people commit more crime or sell more drugs. That's not true. But it is absolutely the case that real racist policies in the past are what sorted black people into the poor communities that they live in now and kind of like systemically impoverished them in the past, directly related to racism. So like that's what systemic racism means, I think. It's that like there are systems in place that perpetuate the real racism from the past, not that people are still being racist today.
So I assume what you're talking about is like things like redlining and how it created the divide between hoods and suburbs and all that type of shit,
Yeah.
and how that still exists today because, you know, the majority black communities are fucking poor as shit, and the white ones
and
are.
even things like,
But how do you fix
do you
that?
know anything about like the Tulsa race riots or whatever, or like the Tulsa massacre?
Yeah, Black Wall Street and shit.
Yeah, you had like, this was
that
the
what you're talking
highest
about?
concentration of black wealth that I think in terms of like net wealth per capita, I think was the highest area of concentrated black wealth in the entire history of the United States, even up to today. And that whole area was absolutely and completely fucking destroyed. And it wasn't because of their geography or anything, it was because of their race, right? So when shit like that happens, it's pretty hard to look at today and be like, oh, well, it's only class issues. Like I can understand why people today are like, well, no, we need to be like racial when we talk about this because it happened for racial reasons in the past.
I mean, that is fair, and the past does somewhat define the future, but let's say with things like affirmative action, do you think that was like something that actually made sense, like a step in the right direction, or was it like an overcorrection of the past?
I think affirmative action, nobody wants to admit it. Nobody wants to admit that affirmative action is good because it makes you sound like a loser, and white people will never admit that it's good, even though for white people, representation matters too. So I think I think one of the benefits of affirmative action is that representation is important and people need to see people that look like them succeed, even if they're getting a little bit of a boost for it initially. White people don't have to think about this because they're like white people are everywhere. So like if I want to be a doctor, I don't have to think like, oh well, are white people doctors? Like that's retarded. As a spoiler alert for like the Jubilee episode that I'm doing, it's kind of funny. I don't know if they'll show it in order, but one of the topics that came up had to do with affirmative action, and obviously it was 4 black conservatives and 4 white liberals. All the black conservatives there were against affirmative action, and they didn't really agree with like representation being important and to push for it. But in a later question that was asked, one of the black conservatives that was there, he was quite young, he said that he was really inspired to get into conservative politics because of Ben Carson. And I didn't point out that like, isn't that kind of like representation right there? But like I thought it was a good example of like, yeah, representation is important. Yeah.
Your representation at whose expense though? Because affirmative action in itself does it not take away positions from more deserving candidates?
It can kind of, but then it's such a stupid joke, but it's kind of funny. Have you or there's a little bit of truth to it. Have you heard of, I think it's a Chris Rock joke where he says that he doesn't believe in affirmative action. If somebody's more qualified, they shouldn't get a job just because, you know, of their race and blah 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 blah. But if there's a tie, fuck them. They had a 300-year head start. That's like his kind of take on it, which is like kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's kind of true. You know, it's kind of like saying like, is it fair? You know, is it fair that when we ask questions like, is it fair to have affirmative action? What we're doing when we ask that question is we're standing at the finish line and we're evaluating the racers as they come in. And we were like, okay, like let's make sure things are 100% fair right now. When the reality is the starting positions were completely unfair to begin with. So I don't know. I think like if you're doing like if like 50% of your enrollments are affirmative action, that's probably not good and that's probably fucked. But if it's like some special side enrollments or a small consideration of everything, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. That like, bro, if you're a black person or if you're a woman or if you're some minority, you probably had to jump through some extra hoops to get here, and that should probably count for something.
The problem with that is about to say some racist shit. Oh my god, how did you get us TV Philly in here about to say some racist shit against white people? What the fuck?
Go ahead.
No, I just got one thing to add. Y'all having a good conversation, so I'll let y'all have it. But the problem is every time I listen to these conversations about, you know, what you guys are talking about, and a black person's not involved, there's always something missing. Always.
Wait.
You guys mentioned almost everything, almost every aspect.
Affirmative action. My bad.
No, you just talked about that. You guys pretty much touched on everything. But okay. What you won't touch on because you don't know about is self-hatred, self-racism. How many black people are racist against themselves? Now, I hear Destiny talk about this with white people, so he understands why it's a problem. But that also goes in the mix with everything you guys just talked about. But that is always something missing from these conversations. But go ahead, guys. Good conversation. Sorry.
Damn.
Wait, that's it?
He just came in here and he said no black people are involved in this conversation. How does that make you feel?
The fuck? I mean, he is right. I am not black. I'm Somali. Oh, speaking about black.
Oh, hold on.
Also, I'm definitely. I guess that's why he came in here. Or server mute him.
Hi. Can I add something too? Yeah, I'll actually having a really good conversation. And I do have some talking points here. And sorry, I'm threatening to ruin your optics all day, Destiny. Anyway, so there is another thing that you guys are kind of glossing over, and it does have to do with the self-hatred aspect of the racism, which is let's see, the black people. I want to say this. I want to say it right. I'm sorry. I'm taking a little bit of time. SCV Philly spoke on black people having hatred for themselves. In an abusive relationship, an abuser really, like, an abuser can't help their victim heal. All right, America has abused black people, really like and atrociously. You, Destiny talked on that and iterated on that.
I don't know if I understand where you're coming from. I don't want to cut you off.
What I'm saying is that an abuser, as America with reparations, cannot help black people if they don't want to help themselves. Right? They have to let your abuser is coming and saying, "Oh, I see I beat your ass down. Let me help you up. Let me pick you up." Unless you're able to grab that hand, there's nothing you can do for yourself. And I think you also go like this is where Q be coming from when he's saying, "Oh, the victim complex, blah blah blah." They want to have the victim complex and don't want to own up to what they what's been given to them. But I think that it's actually an onus on America to realize they have to let go of their white guilt. Honestly, like it just comes from white guilt to think that affirmative action is something that could help a race after you've removed the concept of race from them. Right? These black